it's going to be a very fun episode because you and I have been planning this one for weeks and weeks and weeks. So today we're talking about representations of the intellectual by Edward Said. But before we dive on into what is probably going to be, I'm going to warn all of you listening, probably a very lengthy conversation, because this book is essentially the essence of what it is that we speak about on this podcast, what you and I are trying to build in terms of our own kind of careers and presence. And so there's a lot to say, but before we dive into it, we have a couple of announcements, and then we're going to do the weekly digest before we dive on into the seminar discussion on this book. We have two announcements for this week, and my announcement that I'll be sharing is that we have Back to School, which is September 4th and 5th, Friday and Saturday. This is essentially like a mini version of the symposium. It's all online, and it's available only to accepted members, but we will be live streaming it on YouTube. These are events focused on back to school for all lifelong learners. So this isn't just for those that are actually going back to school in a traditional sense and enrolling in the new semester. This is also for those that are independent scholars, self-studiers, that want a little bit of structure and want to think a little bit more, I guess, intentionally about their practice as they go forward into the autumn season. This is dark academia season. We've got to set ourselves up well. So Cait, you have your journaling session. Do you want to just say a few words about that and your plans for it?
Yes, absolutely. I'm so excited for it. This is kind of my first time really diving into this kind of workshop that I'm going to be running. So I'm going to run a writing for intellectual well-being. So this is going to encompass how to build out a writing practice, not only for your own research, but for your own intellectual well-being. This is going to look at things, as I said, research writing practice, curiosity-based writing practice, looking at the world, developing your own personal study plan, curriculums, and also included in that is obviously going to be a huge amount of journaling and writing prompts, which I absolutely love and I love to bring to the community in my study sessions and just in general. So I'm really, really excited. And then we have a famous back to school reset that you're running, which I'm so excited for.
Yes, this is something I run every single year. I run a big reset. I run weekly resets as well as monthly resets, but essentially the back to school season and then the new year are like, I feel like my time to shine in the reset capacity. And this is just a mindful time to take a little bit of space to look at your patterns, to identify what's worked in the past, to give yourself some tools and reminders as you head on into the new semester. We also have a couple of panels that we're going to be running with our community members, all about lifelong learning and the back to school season. And we've got a plethora of attendees. We've also got a nice Q&A with the team. So this is just a really great space in order to get your questions answered. We're going to be putting out a question box in advance over on the Substack and the YouTube and whatnot. So make sure to add your questions there. But we also have a very exciting announcement that actually can be actionable right now, which is that we finally got your course online. So the only thing I did in participating in this is setting up the website. So Cait, take it away. Tell us about your Renaissance.
Thank you. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited. This has been like a course that has been brewing in the back of my head for 6 months.
Yes.
And I've been developing it reiteration after reiteration for 6 months. And I'm so excited to finally bring it to our Accepted Academy, which is a new launch that we are kicking off with in September. This is really a space for interdisciplinary lifelong learning. We are creating courses that are being led by members of our community to share our pursuit of knowledge, and it's just such an amazing thing. The course that I'm going to be running is called Your Renaissance, Interdisciplinary and Critical Discourse, an introduction to interdisciplinary and critical discourse. I am so excited because essentially what I've done is just pull a whole lot of my favorite sources, The Fairy Queen, The Wasteland, some Renaissance paintings of Elizabeth I, from Da Vinci, and just all these really cool sources. And we're going to be looking at them for 3 weeks, 2 seminars a week in an interdisciplinary manner. You don't need to have prepped anything. You can just pitch up, show up, and walk away with some really great skills about how to not only look at primary sources, but how you can take these skills and apply them to your day-to-day life for looking at the world and being a more curious and better lifelong learner. I'm super duper excited about it. The details are available on the website. Kaelyn, you did a phenomenal job at the website, and I'm absolutely obsessed with it. Thank you so much. And yeah, come and join me from the 14th of September for 3 weeks. It's going to be a great time, and I'm really looking forward to spending time with you all in this interdisciplinary and critical discourse space.
So enrollment's open on the website, so you can head on over. We'll have the links and everything down below, but Cait will be talking a little bit more about the Renaissance course throughout some of our Substack posts. So if you want to learn more there, there's just going to be a lot of information coming your way as we prepare for our first Academy course. And I just want to also say that the Academy courses in future the intention is to have members of our community participate in actually leading courses themselves. And we are also giving profit share to those community members who are going to be leading their own courses. So if anybody in the community is at all interested in running an Academy course, then be sure to get in touch with Cait and myself. So that way we can have some discussions. But without further ado, let's get into the weekly digest. Cait, what are we drinking this morning?
Oh, just water. Water. It's so early. I need a coffee, but I don't want to wake up the rest of the household. So I'm just on the water at the moment.
To me, it's just like too early in the morning to have anything but water. I could maybe have like a mint tea or something, but I don't think I could have anything too substantial right now.
I think I mean, obviously I could do a coffee, but usually I give it.
Cait's like, shut up, Kaelyn. I could do a coffee.
I'm like, I need coffee and an IV, guys. But no, I could do something, but I just don't want to wake up the house, so I am.
Yeah, valid.
I'm on the water. What about you?
Also just drinking some good old H2O, guys.
The Guinness Zeros, as we call them here in Ireland.
A Guinness Zero.
Oh, Guinness Clear. Sorry, a Guinness Clear.
Oh my gosh, that's quite funny. Okay, so what have you been reading this past week?
My goodness. Okay, so I finished up Theodora's Tea Shop like 2 days ago.
Yes.
And are you finished?
I think you and I finished on like the same day.
Amazing. I love that so much. Yeah.
And I emailed Christy like immediately after.
So did I.
I feel bad because I'm sure her emails are just absolutely flooded right now.
Yeah.
And I don't expect her to respond, but I also don't have any other way to get in touch with her because I'm not on social media.
I literally said the exact same thing. I kicked off saying, I can only imagine that you're so overwhelmed and socialized out with the release and book tour, so please don't feel pressure to respond to this message. And then I proceeded to send her the longest Instagram message, so much so that I had to split it into 3 messages.
Yeah.
Theodora's Tea Shop. But I'm so happy for her. It was such a great book. I absolutely adored it. It, as you say, it just felt like sitting in a Studio Ghibli film the whole time. I love that. But so I just finished that up. I haven't really picked anything up since I finished that. I'm kind of in a little bit of a book hangover. But I am going to start reading for my humanist readers for August is reading Lolita in Tehran, which I have wanted to read for ages. It's been on my bookshelf for ages. I have not started it, but it is sitting on my side table. And it's a memoir about reading about 8 women who meet in secret to discuss forbidden works of Western literature.
Oh, that sounds fascinating.
So I know. So I'm really, really excited to dive into it. Also, the
I can't
fact
wait
that
till my
Susan's on
PhD is
type.
done and I can actually participate in your reading group more faithfully.
It's been amazing, I have to say. Like, we've basically had such a great exploration into books that are on my shelf, but I've never kind of been drawn to pick up.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, oh, I just want to do this all the time, just read so randomly, and it's amazing. So beyond that, I am still reading All My Precious Madness. That's upside down. All My Precious Madness. Really loving this. Just the pure sass is amazing. Henry Nash is by far like my new favorite sassy character ever. I just love how sassy and critical he is. And then I have been reading as a part of like my own self-studying group, or my own self-study curriculum is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and I'm loving that. Absolutely loving that. So those are my books. Not really much in terms of a pile on the side table at the moment. It's a bit sparse.
Only been a week.
It's only been a week. It's a bit sparse. I need to go pick up some more.
I never need to pick up more. I've got plenty of books for the rest of my lifetime. But I read Theodora's Tea Shop. I absolutely loved the way that she handled disfigurement and chronic illness, found family. Anytime a fantasy in particular has like a really strong kind of found family tie, it always resonates, and I love it a lot. I really enjoyed it. I feel like I'm kind of glad that I didn't really know very much about the book going in. Because it unfolded really beautifully, and I also just felt like I was existing in Christy's head in a way that was really fun. And you know, when a book really feels like someone, I just felt like it just captured Christy's essence in a way that was just really, really fascinating. I then picked up Whistler by Ann Patchett, and I finished it last night. It was so beautiful. So the basic gist for those that haven't read it or come across it, I'll put like a little shot of the cover on the screen because it's in the room and my partner's sleeping. I forgot to grab it. It's got a beautiful cover, but essentially it's about this woman at kind of midlife who is married, and she's had these range of experiences. She's a school teacher, and she runs into her former stepfather at the Met in New York. And this is someone who was married to her mother for 14 months, so they weren't married for very long. And there was essentially something that happened. There was an accident that occurred that was kind of used as the quote excuse for the parents separating, and that this has kind of left a bit of a scar for our main character, Daphne. And this is a lot of like kind of slightly personal info, but I actually grew up in a poly household. So my mom had polyamorous relationships, and I've had many father figures throughout my life. I have a stepdad who was who was married to my mom. She also had multiple partners throughout my childhood and adult years. And it resonated in a way that was really, really quite special. There was a couple things that like didn't, because there's some details about their relationship and about what happened between the two parents that I don't think factored into the experience between my mom and her partners. But it was so beautifully done. And it's one of those books that I was like really worried was going to make me quite emotional. And actually it just felt like a bit nostalgic. It just felt like quite heartwarming. There was never a point where I was like upset.
Is this your first Patchett that you've read?
Yeah.
Oh, she's so great.
Yeah.
She's such an incredible writer. Oh my goodness. You have such a journey ahead of you with the rest of her work, because it's just incredible. I haven't read Whistler, but I just adore her. I adore her work. I desperately want to go to a bookshop that she owns
in Nashville,
runs.
yeah.
And she did a TED talk a while ago on the importance of promoting the thing that you love, which I think ties in so nicely to our talk. But she talks about how opening up a bookshop essentially is kind of her love letter to reading. And it is a phenomenal talk. I'll leave a link. We can leave a link for it in the description down below. But I just really feel she's one of those rare authors that encapsulates so much about what it means to be, what it means to share that knowledge, share that influence with your community, and create those spaces in community, which is so important. I
really enjoyed it. What should I read next? Which Ann Patchett should I read next, Cait?
Oh, Tom Lake.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So the third book that's been on my mind. I don't normally mention books that I'm reading for my research, primarily because I am dipping into
a wealth,
like 50 different books in a single week. Sometimes in a single writing session. And
I don't even want to tell you the pile that's sitting here.
Yeah,
that I've cleared off my desk. Yeah, no, it's mad.
I got like a specific like book organizer for next to my desk, because I was like, oh, well, it would be nice to have them close to hand, and yet I still have piles everywhere. It's just how it goes. It reminds me of walking into a professor's office when I was at UCLA and just thinking to myself, so this is how a historian works.
Yes,
and I was like
looking around everywhere,
and there's like papers everywhere and books everywhere, and I've never walked into a historian's office that doesn't have just massive piles of books like scattered throughout.
Mark's office is just like literally wall to ceiling, just shelves and books and everything, and I adore it. Like, I'm desperate to allow him to let me like just
I
wander
want like a
through.
photo. I want a photo documentary series of scholars' offices.
Honestly, I think that would be amazing. I would love that so much. Sorry.
but no, it's so the book that I've been quite moved by over the last week while working on my dissertation has been England's Other Countrymen, Black Tudor Society by Onyeka and Nubia. Great book. He also wrote Blackamoors. I'm assuming he's probably written more since, because I saw him that would have been 2019 in Oxford. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was actually at a talk with him and the very famous Miranda Kaufman in the same room, and didn't know that these two scholars were going to have such an impact on my career. But what I'm really appreciating, and the thing that's kind of gotten my mind, all the cogs turning, is that a lot of what I have studied as a Black Studies scholar has been with a post-colonial framework, because a lot of the time what we're looking at is material in the Americas. We're looking at the Black American experience in the United States, and a lot of my research focuses on the 17th century, in which case, England is becoming increasingly an imperial influence in colonizing North America and the Caribbean.
Yeah.
But what he kind of articulates very clearly, and it hasn't, in my opinion, been as clearly articulated by other scholars of Black life in early modern England, is that we need to look at the presence of Black people in England with a pre-colonial framework, which is very difficult for somebody who's been kind of trained and versed and prepared to place everything in a post-colonial framing.
Yeah.
And the reason that's so important is that a lot of the source material that I've come across does, to be honest, look very prejudiced. It looks quite anti-Blackness. And the line that he essentially says that historians tend to toe is either we see exploitation, we see slavery everywhere. If somebody is in any kind of form of a bondage, and by the way, just to put a little footnote here, the definition of bondage that I'm working with is basically kind of any bound labor that either does or does not require a consented contract. But in the case of early modern England, it is assumed consent into a form of labor whereby you are tying your labor to another individual rather than via specific payment. So instead of a trade, it is that you are binding yourself for a period of time in service of another. And in this case, he says essentially either we see exploitation and slavery everywhere, in any form of bondage, and on the other hand, we see them as so marginal and so insignificant statistically that they obviously weren't thought of much. Which he argues in both cases kind of strips the subject of their humanity and also isn't a critical reading of the source material. And I had come across a quote in the parish record, or sorry, not the parish records, in the Elizabethan like Privy Council records, and essentially it talks about this concern over like Black men having children with English women. He describes Blackness as an infection on the children, and that language is very charged,
of course,
in the reading, but actually in trying to kind of delve into more context, Nubia very clearly articulates, there are these select people that are saying things from within Elizabeth's cabinet, or are participating in some degree of dissemination, but it's not like, this is not the public opinion, this is not representative of the attitudes of the time. A lot of the men that are making these comments are involved in mercantile relations with the African continent, and it didn't blow my mind because it's not a perspective that I hadn't come across, but it was an articulation that so clearly established a gray area that it just kind of just like turned my perspective a little bit. And so I've been trying to kind of parse through the source material, and I've been writing this one section about like pre-colonial versus post-colonial perspectives and theory. And yeah, it's just been a fascinating kind of intellectual exercise.
I think this is so interesting. This pertains so prevalently to my research because
you should read this. This would be he is a historian, but a lot of the source material, as you're aware, in the early modern period, it's literary, in order to get at people's perspectives.
Absolutely.
He also is very anti-Shakespeare, which I find quite fascinating, that, you know, oftentimes the reading of the early modern period and its perspectives on Blackness are coming from primarily Othello.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I find really fascinating about this is there's so many parallels between like the language, the infectious diseases that you were talking about, that you see in Spencer's treatment of the Irish, which
Yes.
is so interesting because there is this sense of othering that happens in Elizabethan Tudor England that is becoming so entrenched as I use English identity very loosely. English identity in terms of early modern English identity is
Yeah.
becoming defined, or at least being attempted to be defined by the select group of elite, and that formation of identity presupposes a dichotomous other, whether it is seen in people of color, whether it's seen in terms of foreigners, whether it's seen in terms of religious identity, whether it's seen in terms of anything that is dichotomously opposed to what they are perceiving that identity as. So yes, I'm going to go and pick up that book. It sounds so fascinating. I'm so interested in hearing what has to be said. But I think you're quite right. That kind of that articulation of our critical discourse has to be placed within the time period that we are looking at. Post-colonial lenses are so important, but we as historians or literary historians cannot impose those lenses in the space.
What's interesting
create an intentional fallacy about it, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Yes. I think that absolutely is the message. The thing that I'm walking away with, though, is that I am only coming across source material that, you know, it's either parish records that are very kind of sterile, you know, it's when it mentions Ethiopian or Blackamoor, that is an ethnic category, essentially, and it's usually just so and so was baptized on this day by so and so, and it's very sterile. But a lot of the public discourse that I see in the written record is quite prejudicial.
Quite right. Yeah, absolutely.
And the perspective of, you know, just taking a second and applying a question to say, okay, yes, this person made this statement. How widely believed is that? How widely concerning is that? And the challenge is that I don't tend to work with a lot of literary material because of my kind of general framing, because I'm a legal historian. But there's a couple of instances where I do use works of art, or I do use certain literary references, primarily like broadside pamphlets and poems and sermons that are delivered primarily at the expense of the Virginia Company. But he brings up a lot of source material in one of the chapters. I'll share the exact chapter with you specifically later. But where he references a lot of very positive affirmation of Blackness, insofar as actually, like, there's a lot of statements of like Blackness is the greatest beauty and things of that nature, which I wouldn't have come across. And this is why, I mean, you and I are big proponents of interdisciplinary study, but this is also where I'm so glad that I've had Black studies training, because in Black studies, we aren't just looking at like documentary historic material It's also looking at objects. It's also looking at music. It's looking at, you know, a variety of material in order to kind of parse out what's happening at a particular moment in time. And yeah, anyway, that's just like a random tangent. But it's just like gotten my mind working over the last week.
I love it. I love it so much. It's so fascinating. One of the books that I should have mentioned is I just finished reading Afroben's Orinoku. And so I have so many thoughts, but I'm going to reserve them for my humanist readers lecture, which is coming up next weekend. So
excellent.
But it's this whole idea of like, what are the source materials actually telling us? And how do we digest that? Knowing that everyone has a particular view, everyone has a purpose, everyone has a driver for what they are, why they're creating what they're creating.
So I think that encapsulates, to be honest, like my thought of the week. I feel like everything has kind of been spinning off from having read this book. It's just such an incredible piece of work. I really want to pick up his other book, the previous book, but yeah, I would say that kind of encapsulates my thought of the week. But what's yours?
My thought of the week, honestly, I've got a lot of thoughts. But I think the one that I want to share with everyone is that in the last couple of weeks, there have been a lot of things that have been coming up, a lot of opportunities that have been coming up, and this was kind of prompted off the back of one of the members of Accepted sharing a post about some difficulties that they were having in terms of starting over and starting their careers or starting their new their graduate journey. And it really got me thinking, because last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of things that have come up, a lot of opportunities for work to do that I'm really excited to dive into. But it did make me reflect on the fact that some of these connections, some of these conversations that I've been having with people where the opportunities are coming up now happened years and years ago. You know, there is, I think we are so attuned to having things, you know, wanting something and then being able to get it within the next week or month or whatever the case may be. And I suppose my thought of the week is essentially to just allow things to take time. Because if you do allow things to take time and you put in the effort as much as you can, obviously in the moment, but sometimes it does take months and years for things to come to fruition. And it's just something I've really been thinking about, because I have been I've been reflecting a lot on the fact that the position that I'm in now has taken 6 years for me to get here. It's taken 6 years of part-time study while working to actually get to this place. And that's not an easy feat. Like 6 years is a long time commitment. And I think we forget, in the age that we're in, where we're just constantly sort of fed this information of quick fixes and quick ways to make money.
No, none of it's quick.
None of it is quick. It takes time, and it takes investment, and it takes commitment. And that's not easy. It's not easy, but it's so joyful at the end of it, and so fulfilling at the end of it. So that's my thought for this week.
Interesting. Okay, I have like a minor thought. I shared this in the weekly reset 2 days ago. When was Sunday? 2 days ago?
2 days ago.
And I oscillate, you know this about me. I oscillate between like feeling really gung-ho about creating a career and a life as a historian, as an independent historian outside of academia, and showing that can be done. But that obviously is a very big unknown. I don't know very many historians that have done that, other than those that typically start in academia, get published, and then kind of move outside or are attached to some kind of professional institution. I don't know any truly independent historians other than those that are authors.
Yeah.
And so it's a big question mark on if that's, if that's feasible. And over the last week, I was thinking about it, and I was like, is it a better option? Is it safer? Is it smarter to just get a 9 to 5 and, have a pension and actually have money in savings and things of that nature? And it's quite interesting because my mom is very much the freelancer, and she's always had multiple jobs and multiple things that she's working on. My grandmother is an entrepreneur, but my dad is the one who took like the very secure, safe, worked in tech, worked in the C-suite at a company for 30-40 years. And I always just kind of like feel this like pull back and forth. And you saying that, thinking about, these things take time. The easy quick fix for safety and for that sense of security would be to just get the job, work for somebody else. And I look all the time at, academic posts, but also like administrative posts. I look at various things. I keep an eye on LinkedIn. And if you actually were to parse that out, so let's say you were to look at the effort that you've put in today, and this is something I really like doing with the reset, but if you were to basically continue this pattern for the next 5-10 years, like where would that lead you? And if you were to, there's this thing called the Odyssey plan, whereby, you like, if you were to keep doing the same thing, this is where it would lead me. If I were to take this, if I made this choice, where would that lead me? And if I look at it 5-10 years from now, I think I'm going to be much more grateful that I like stuck it out. And so, I'm glad you said that.
It's something, as you well know, but maybe our listeners don't know, it's something I've wrestled with a lot this year, because it's meant a lot of how, I left my job at Google in November, which is, in the grand scheme of things, of a 10-11 year long career, is not a long time ago. Where I, and in the grand scheme of my life, where I was always taught that security and freedom would come with getting the 9 to 5, working my way up into the C-suite, and then I will have the happy life, then I will have the financial freedom, then I will be able to live the life that I've always wanted to live. And I think that's true for some people. I think it's very true for some people who are able to distinguish between their life and the 9 to 5, as the job is a means to an end, rather than the entire encapsulation. You and I are similar in that we're just not those people. When we put our time and effort into something, it's wholehearted, it's 120%. And so it's been a huge journey for me to realize or realign those pathways, and think about the fact that yes, this is taking time, and it's going to take time to get to where it needs to go. Nothing is going to happen instantaneously, but it's about laying the groundwork, making those connections, communicating with people now, because you just never know what's going to come down the line in a year or 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever the case may be. So that's my thought that I'd like to leave our audience with, is make the small steps. It's the same thing as like you watch the pennies and the dollars take care of themselves. It's kind of like that, in terms of take the small actions, and sometimes the big ones will just appear later on.
I love that. Feels very fitting for today's conversation as well.
Great way to kick off today.
Yeah. So we have a few more things we need to cover before we dive on into our discussion. What's your favorite of the week?
My favorite of the week. This week has been so busy. Okay. Favorite of the week. Actually, I will flag up my favorite thing recently has been my end of week Friday writing sessions with Accepted Society. I absolutely love it. We've got like a regular group of people now that show up every single Friday, and we spend the time reflecting. We do a journal prompt before we kick off the writing session as kind of a reflection, and then we do a warm-up, and then we get into it. It's been such a joy and such a sense of community in that space, because over the last couple of weeks, we've really seen so much progress with members that are working on their various things. One of our members just submitted their dissertation in the session, and people are working towards their own writing goals, their research goals. And then the other day, someone jumped in who is working on their novel, and they were jumping in and just enjoying the writing session and the place for that. And I think this is my favorite this week, because the last one that we had, I had a rough Friday. There was just a lot going on in terms of requests and things like that. And I always try and like leave the session, I always try and give the vibe of the session of like being uplifting and finishing the week on a really good note. And I kind of came on at the end of the session. I said to everyone, I'm sorry, I can't do it. Like this is what's happened in the space of today. And I'm just not in a space to be motivating or to be, to uplift. And the most incredible thing was to see everyone else bandy together, basically to say, that's okay, you're okay, we'll do it, we'll do the uplifting. And I just love that, because it probably talks a bit to what we're going to talk about with representations of the intellectual. But it just shows that kind of beauty of community where you don't always have to show up. You show up, sorry, let me reframe that. You show up as you are.
Yeah.
And
you don't have to show up perfect.
You don't have to show up perfect, because you're part of a group. You're not one isolated person.
Yeah.
And relying on people around you when you need the lift is actually a really amazing thing. So that's my favorite of the week. What's your favorite of the week?
Well, I saw Hamilton last night.
Ah, amazing.
And I had just such an insane time. I had this conversation during the weekly reset on Sunday. We did the financial audit. It's like an optional thing at the end where everybody can come together, and if you tend to avoid your finances, you can come and hang out and actually, take a look at where your money's going and whatnot. And we were having this conversation, and Sylvie was talking about how she has, instead of, getting into a bit of a habit of like thrifting and going on things like Depop and whatnot, that she was trying to kind of transfer the money that she would be spending to the creators and the artists and the scholars that she wants to support on Substack.
Oh, I love
and
that.
yeah, it was wonderful. And I was thinking about it, and I have a Substack article currently percolating in my brain about the title that I'm currently running with, and I think this is it all ties together, is it's not enough to defend the humanities, you have to support it. And I was thinking about this over the last week because I went to a bunch of museums with my mom. We went to the Tate Britain, we went to the Schiaparelli exhibit at the V&A, we went and saw Wicked at the West End. I paid a ridiculous amount of money to see one of my favorite actors reprise his role as Aaron Burr in Hamilton. So Leslie Odom Jr. did a run last year in Broadway, or at Broadway. Anyway, on Broadway. There we go. On Broadway. And he returned to his role, and I couldn't get tickets. I went to the States in November, and I tried with all my might to try to find a ticket, but there just wasn't any options. And then my friend, who knows how much I absolutely love Hamilton, the play, had messaged me saying, guess who's coming to London? And so I was like, whatever money is in my savings is going to this. I have
going
to
straight to this. Yeah,
I have to
absolutely.
see him. And I was thinking about it because I've spent a lot of time kind of engaged in the arts over the last week and a half. I went to the ballet the week before that, and I was like, there is no better use of my money. There is no better use of my time than finding ways. Obviously I'm not putting myself into bankruptcy. I'm not, putting these things on credit cards. I'm not putting myself in debt in order to support these things. This is the money that I have earned that I really want to contribute to the things that I love, that enrich my life, that enrich the lives of others. And I got to see Hamilton last night, and it was the most, oh my god, I'm gonna cry. It was the most insane experience.
I love that so
watching somebody do something that they are so good at, and that they so obviously are having such an insane fun time with, was just such a treat. And he may have just smiled in my general direction, but I swear to god we made eye contact.
You know what? Hold on to it, man. Like, that is an incredible experience.
Oh my gosh. And I wanted to savor it in every way possible. I was like, you know what? This is a once in a lifetime experience. I have no idea if I'm ever going to get to see him perform again. When am I ever going to get to see him perform in London? I love the irony of being an early American historian who came to watch Hamilton in England. And I'm so glad that I saved that first time of seeing Hamilton in London so that I could see Leslie Odom Jr. do his thing. And I went out, I got myself a dinner reservation. I went to this French restaurant on my own, and
gorgeous.
I also just I sat there, I savored my food. I didn't take out my book. I just sat there. I just enjoyed. I just fully embraced the entire experience of the evening. There was a guy sitting next to me who was very obviously on his own. He was very young. He must have been in his very early 20s. And I had said to him, "Are you here alone?" And he said, "Yes, I'm from Germany. It's my first time ever taking a solo trip. I've been to all of these plays, and I was so excited to come and see Hamilton. And I'm just surrounded by all of these people that obviously, we've invested a lot of money to be there."
Yes, of course.
But in doing so, I was surrounded by people that just so loved the craft of performance, and obviously had, invested time, energy, money in order to support this thing that we love. And I just think that we should do more of that. I just think, you know, of all the things that you could spend your money on, and all the things that you could spend your time doing, and all the things that you could spend your attention on, it's not enough to just say like the arts are important and the humanities are important and to put it in commercial terms.
Yes.
But we need to like commit our energy to supporting it, to promoting it, to sharing in the love and the passion of it. And I'm not saying that you need to like invest. I'm not saying you have to invest your money in it. But if you can, and it's something that does matter to you, like what a better expression of love than to support this thing.
I think this is, I could not agree with you more on this. I think it's such a wonderful thing, and it's something I've noticed that you absolutely, if you can put money to it, do it. But you can't, there are things that you can do that don't require money and just require effort. And it's one thing I've been loving with the Substack is doing my 15 authors for 1,500 followers, because there are some incredible authors, writers on Substack. There are incredible historians, there are incredible literary critics, there are incredible artists, there are incredible people that just so exude this love of the craft that they are doing, and they might not be getting the screen time that they deserve.
Yes.
Because it could be flooded by whatever it's flooded by. And I think there is so much that we can do in supporting those people who clearly do just have a love for it and just clearly have a love for the work that they're doing. And it does not take that much time, and it does not take that much energy to just engage, repost, comment, flag up someone that resonates or you see has put in a lot of effort into the work they're doing. And even if you don't necessarily agree 100%, great, engage in that discourse. It does, you know, that's just as beneficial to bring that in.
I would also say doing things like I've been taking my book with me. I mean, I take my book with me everywhere, always. But I've been taking it with me to the gym, and I leave my phone in the locker, and I just take my book, and I usually show up early for the class. And every single time, like every single class I've taken over the last 2 weeks, the instructor has commented on it and asked about the book.
Yeah.
And like it's simple things like that. It's showing and exuding a passion for the thing, and you know, showing others that that's something that's an option.
Yeah, absolutely. It boggles my mind whenever I get onto the train how many people just sit with their face in their phone. And I get it, you know, at the end of a long work day, there's nothing that you want to do more than just shut your brain off and do nothing. But
then do nothing.
Nothing. Sit and watch the view. Look at the ocean. My train ride is gorgeous. It goes along the southern coast of the Dublin coast, and no one is looking at the ocean. Yeah. It's just something I purposefully don't open. I purposefully put my phone in my bag during my train ride. Whether I'm reading or whether I'm just looking at the view, I do not have my phone in front of me.
And so we should do some. We can do an episode on that.
We can do an episode about that.
But yeah, going and seeing Hamilton, it was worth every penny. I cried, I laughed, I smiled, it was just an incredible night. So that's my favorite. Experience. It'll be a favorite for a long time.
Beautiful experience.
Night of a lifetime. So, what is your theme of the week?
Theme of the week is planning, is organization.
Got it.
I've just gotten sort of my teaching schedule for Trinity, and we're launching Your Renaissance and the Academy program, and there are a couple of things that are happening in the next 3 to 4 months that I just need to get a handle on in terms of planning. I am one of those people that's so easily overwhelmed when the to-do list is very, very long. But I am also very easily calmed when I have a plan. So
yeah,
that is the theme for the week, is planning for calm. What about you?
Okay. My theme of the week is in the weeds. I'm at a section of the dissertation that I have the knowledge, but I don't have enough of the direct source material. I think I spoke about this in one of the previous weeks, but essentially the scans that I have for these documents are just not legible. I just can't really use them. So I have an archive trip that I'm trying to organize. But in the meantime, I'm trying to basically get the scaffolding for the chapter sorted out. And it's one of those things where I wrote the introduction and that came so easily. And now I'm at a section where I need to kind of get into one of the subsections, and I'm realizing that without the direct source material, and by what I mean by this is I know that the source material exists because I've seen it cited, and I just need the specific examples that I want to use to tell this story, and I don't have them. So I'm taking that and basically using it as an excuse to dig into the weeds, to just kind of like suss out what the literature is saying. And it's been one of those things where, you know, you start an article and it footnotes another article, and you go and download that article, and that, like, it's been one of those. And I don't normally allow myself the time to do that because it's time consuming, but I'm just letting myself have fun this week. Well, now that we've gone over our theme, it is time for a quick interlude and diving on in to today's seminar. Today's discussion is all about Representations of the Intellectual by Edward Said. This is essentially a copy of his 1993 Wreath Lectures with BBC Channel 4. And I wanted to give a little bit of background on Said. I'm assuming that many of the people that are listening to this may have either encountered him in the past or heard his name. He looms large in the field of the humanities. But essentially, Edward Said was born in Jerusalem in Palestine, and during the settling of the state of Israel, his family moved on to Egypt and then Lebanon. He was taught in English schools in Cairo and then ended up moving to the United States, where he got his bachelor's degree at Princeton. He got a doctorate at Harvard and then went on to become a professor of comparative literature at Columbia. He also became a member of the Palestinian National Council, and he was listed on many intellectual blacklists as an enemy of the state of Israel. He is best known for his work as a public intellectual, as somebody who spoke very outrightly about injustices on a global scale, but also specifically within the Israeli-Palestine conflict. And he has also written many books that I'm sure some of us have encountered, including most prominently Orientalism from 1978 and Cultural and Imperialism from 1993. The Wreath Lectures in particular are lectures that have been put on since 1948 by BBC Radio 4. It continues to be a radio podcast rather than a visual podcast or visual production. And its stated mission is a public service which enriches the intellectual and cultural life of the nation. They've brought on numerous speakers, including Bertrand Russell, Robert Oppenheimer, Stephen Hawking, Hilary Mantel, just to name a few. And you can listen to these lectures on the Radio 4 website. So one of the things that I actually did in reading a few of these was actually listen to him while reading along. And I will say that definitely enriched the experience. So Cait, I'm going to kind of hand it off to you because
Yes.
I have no way of organizing my thoughts on this topic because, yeah, as I'm sure you're well aware, there's just so many threads that we can pull on in this, what we engaged with as a book, but it is also more specifically a spoken recording.
Absolutely. And I have to say that I remember when, I mean, this is so ridiculous, but I actually do remember when these were aired. I was a child, and I remember my dad talking about them, funny enough. Now, I can't quite remember exactly what was being said, but as soon as I started reading these lectures, I actually was brought back to a place where I was like, I remember this. I remember this being a point of discussion that was kicked off in during the time. But I think these lectures are really, really fascinating. What we have with Cait's lectures is, the first point to kind of kick off with this is that they are written and produced in 1993. So they are quite, there is significant things that are happening around this time that he is responding to, that he is writing towards. And most prevalent is his experience with Palestine and his opinions around Palestine. But I think what's really interesting is in these lectures, he really draws us back to the bare roots of creating an argument and putting forward an argument for a public audience. So it was really interesting to me that he creates this argument of what it means to be an intellectual in a space that drives a sense of critical review of ourselves in the space, a critical review of what the everyday person is doing in the space, and how do we want to adapt our behavior? How do we want to look at what we're doing to contribute to the space? And I think that's kind of the direction I want to take us down, because most of the time when we look at characters like Edward Said, Bertrand Russell, Hilary Mantel, there is almost a sense of them being at a level that's unattainable for the rest of society. And one thing I absolutely loved about his argument was how the intellectual needs to represent reality for the public, but never function as a representative.
Yeah.
And this takes a sense of like removing a sense of hierarchy in intellectualism. It creates a sense of the idea of collective power. At least for me, this is what I'm pulling out of that research. Intellectuals should be questioning. They have a duty to search for relative independence from pressures of society. Sorry, I have so many notes. I'm going to be referring to them
I do too
all the time.
So.
And obviously there are some consequences to that, which I think would be great to get into. But I wanted to ask you what you thought about this idea of an intellectual who is not a representative.
So what's interesting to me is like that didn't seem like that novel an idea to me. When I came across it, because I'm actually I do have a question to kind of throw back to you, but I'll start with a bit of an example, because I am curious as to the way that one immediately imagines what the public intellectual is. So like who comes to mind when you're considering your kind of archetype of a public intellectual? So who comes up for you?
I mean, the first person that comes up for me is Saeed. Is this idea of a person who has dedicated their life to intellectual inquiry, and has spoken out for it. But at the same time, I'm very conscious of the fact that I was having this conversation with a friend recently who was saying they're not sure that out of our modern generation, out of the generation of the last 30 years, that there is any great thinkers that they can think of off the top of their head.
Interesting. Okay.
I thought that was very interesting, because I thoroughly disagreed, but at the same time, I wanted to reflect on it. I wanted to really think about it, because are the people that I would say in the last 30 years are great thinkers of our time, are they actually great thinkers of our time that are making inroads in what it means to be a public intellectual, or are they celebrities? And I use the word celebrity very loosely here. You know, is it someone who is, you know, has created the space because of books they've published, or is it someone who has created a space because?
But I would say that I would say that all of the thinkers that come up for me, it's yes, Edward Said, Noam Chomsky, James Baldwin, but of the modern day, David Blight, Joanne Freeman, Jill Lepore. I don't necessarily think that I would classify them as like scholar celebrities, but I don't think that that's something that they themselves have ascribed. I think every single one of them would say that wasn't the goal.
100%. Totally agree.
So I don't know if we can fault them. I don't think we can fault them for that.
I don't think we can fault them for that. But I'm curious in critiquing this vision that Said is putting on, because at the point that he's writing this, social media is not a thing.
Yeah, I kept thinking of that. Though new media and things like the live broadcast of debates was at its height in the 80s and the 90s.
Totally. At the same time, what we're not getting, and you and I know this very well, what we're not getting in those spaces, and what Saeed's not getting in those spaces, is engagement from the general public.
Yes. Yeah.
He's not getting comments on a YouTube video, or he's not getting comments directly on a podcast from a listener who relates or does not relate, or agrees or does not agree, or wants to make a correction because
that's a good point. Yeah,
that's and so I found myself questioning a lot of what he is saying in this space, because I think, yes, in 1993, I think it's a fabulous lecture, and I do think there holds some really key fundamentals that he talks about. I'm curious how we apply this and how we look at his theory of what it means to be a public intellectual, what it means to be an intellectual in today's age.
I think, I have like the beginning of a kernel of an idea.
Yeah.
So the three pressures that he says exist on the professionalization of the intellectual are specialization, political correctness, and power and authority. He says that the antidote to the desire to kind of professionalize, and his kind of definition of professionalization is both in financial terms, so in making a living, and in behavior and conduct. And his antidote is what he calls amateurism, by taking an approach as not needing to be the credible, like the credible victor of the debate, more so engaging with the ideas in a position of, actually, I don't know the answer. Actually, I don't, I am not the quote expert in a specific kind of wedge. And I don't know that he's so he is concerned with the public intellectual, but more so with the definition of the intellectual, which I think are two different things. So the public intellectual may or may not have some kind of affiliation, and I find it interesting that his definition really hinges on the concept of independence, of intellectual independence. And the thing that strikes me that I had a really hard time connecting with, and I'm still struggling with, is twofold. One, tenure post McCarthyism did have some degree of protection around one's intellectual exploration. So, Said was a professor at Columbia University, and therefore had the backing, the support of Columbia University, but also had the support within the tenure structure to engage publicly and to, participate in the Palestinian National Council. I don't believe that scholars of today, and this is obviously a much longer conversation about the job market, but, suffice it to say that there are less opportunities that provide that level of institutional protection.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I kept coming up against. And the second part is honestly, like, I just kept coming back to, like, how does one make a living? Like, I'm not saying that you need to, like, profit from the State Department, which is a fair criticism, but it's one thing to talk about intellectual independence from within the insulation of a tenured chair, and within a chair that obviously comes with a salary and insurance and things of that nature. And so I have two ways of thinking about this. I think that the way that we put this in practice is embracing amateurism. So embracing, sharing the intellectual process out loud, whether that's it doesn't have to be on social media. It's also engaging in your community. It's participating in small public lectures and things of that nature. So that doesn't have to be done as a profession. It can be done, while working on and making a living elsewhere, but engaging in the intellectual process. And what he says is, like, fueling it with care and the freedom of thought. So I think that's one answer. But the one that I find a little bit more challenging to kind of wrap my head around is that he creates this dichotomy of somebody who is essentially, like, a marginalized scholar, so has basically, like, no has very little potential impact. And I would also, it's less so. We'll get into the concept of marginalization and exile in a moment. But so there's the marginalized scholar who does not have much leverage, but I also am increasingly concerned that in the 21st century would not have an income.
Yeah.
And would also not have any job security, especially, I'm thinking about these things especially in the framework of the United States, so I can't speak to how these things would be potentially protected elsewhere. But then the other side, he says, there's this dichotomy between the marginalized and then the sellout, like the somebody who, goes and works with the State Department, works at a think tank. Or what's curious to me is that he doesn't ever like point at the institution of academia necessarily also. Again, like the tenure structure and whatnot, at least to my knowledge, created better insulation in the 90s than what we would expect today, in which case there absolutely is a form of political correctness and a degree to which you do not have intellectual freedom in contemporary academia. And yeah, how does somebody who wants to be a public intellectual or an intellectual in general, how do they do so in a way that also supports making a living? Is the big question that kept
that kept coming
overarched up. Like I kept waiting for an answer. And in fairness, very different circumstances. As I said,
right, yeah.
The university did to my knowledge provide that space for intellectual exploration and debate in a way that I don't think that it does anymore. And I'm curious as to like what factors would allow it to be so in the future, but I think that's a different conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I really loved about the way that he spoke about amateurism as an idea was essentially he writes this quote which I absolutely love, and I wrote down, I speak and write about broad matters because as a rank amateur I am spurred on by commitments that go well beyond my narrow professional career. And that really stuck with me because I think what I keep coming back to is this idea of, and this is kind of what we were talking about at the beginning, is this idea of action that does not take effort or time or money to engage with, to support and to uplift, even when, and especially when, it is beyond a professional career or a narrow career. And I think this comes from his sense of marginalization. This is pure and utter speculation on my part, so I will flag that up. But I am very conscious of the fact that he is first and foremost a literary critic, and his sources, his strength is in that literary analysis and that engagement with literary sources. Because what literary study does is it helps you to see how people react and would react in circumstances that are different to your own. It gives you a sense of empathy that is truly incredible and that allows you to foster that sense of curiosity and foster that sense of relatability, not necessarily relatability, but understanding of another's circumstances. And I think that really comes into this idea of marginalization for him, because he is very conscious of the fact that he himself, and he says this, has been marginalized, has been exiled, has been pushed out of those conversations. And so I really see that coming into play in the way that he establishes his representations of the intellectual, as almost saying, I've been in these circumstances. This is what I've seen in my experiences, in the literature, in the narrative, and I am not the expert. I am not
yes.
I'm not
yes.
the person in the room to be saying these things. But there is also a space for the voice. But I want to come back to this idea of marginalized versus the sellout, and the idea of the income, because I kept butting my head up against this in kind of the modern society. Like, how would you make an income? What would be your source of income in this space? And I'd had a conversation with a friend of mine about this off the back of my readings of meditations, because Marcus Aurelius is the emperor of Rome. He holds a significant amount of political power. He is the representative. He is the leader. He is the emperor. And yet he cautions this hold of power. He cautions the way in which his influence and power is that he wields, and how that is distributed. And he does that in his meditations. Often he reflects on this idea of his influence and his power in his position. And it really got me thinking about it. And I came up with one thing that I haven't fully explored, is this idea of the value of knowledge. And
okay.
I am talking very specifically about the value about knowledge and its monetary value.
Okay.
Because what we are seeing in the state of the world, and what we are seeing in the commercialization of our universities, and Adam Walker speaks to this in one of his videos, where he talks about the commercialization of universities, is this idea of the fact that universities and the institutions have shifted into this model of creating profit off something that they find tangible. So research that is going to produce tangible results. And my view of this, of Said's, is that he attributes a huge amount of value to that intellectual thought, and that representative engaging in that intellectual thought. But at the moment, it's a very difficult sell. It's a very, very difficult sell in the modern day to go and say to someone, I'm running this course about intellectual thought. Here's the price of it. Come and spend this money on it. Because it almost seems like we're, in a sense, wired to say, well, what am I going to get out of this? And when we don't have those tangibilities, it's very difficult to sell in today's environment. So I think the question that I keep butting up against is how do we reevaluate the value of knowledge and of an intellectual inquiry? And how do we push institutions to think about that more and make that value seen, and make that a point by which it now becomes a source of income for someone?
Yes. The thing
that
I...
Sorry, it's not fully formed, but yeah.
I hate that I'm going to take a slightly cynical view. I normally don't, but in thinking about like the economic structure of the university, post World War II, a lot of money was placed into defense, into, you know, creating scientific innovation for the sake of competing against the Soviet Union in the Cold War. And he mentions this. There's like a specific page that he speaks about the funding from the State Department.
Yep.
And I remember a conversation at Oxford, which was specifically about divesting from like fossil fuels at the college level. And so my curiosity, and I guess like my slightly cynical view, and I don't have an answer for it, is on the one hand, universities to an extent, at least in the modern day, have in some way been funded by exploitative, commercial, and imperialistic missions, and is using the knowledge of the intellectual in order to purport that movement.
Yeah.
And who was it? Oh, I spent the last week. I'm still working through it. I'm still working through my thoughts, but I've spent the last week watching and taking notes on and preparing a Substack article on the Senate and House hearings on the American History Museum at the Smithsonian. And David Blight makes this comment about how history is used, like historical knowledge is used as a vehicle in moments of political and foreign policy, like strife within. And he points specifically to Cold War triumphalism, how both like quote political correctness and how because I was doing both at the same time, I can't remember like which source it was coming from, because there's like the David Blight conversation, then there's also comments about the use of political correctness in the McCarthy era. So it does come from both sources, but essentially how that knowledge is used as a vehicle in order to boost the aims of the nation state.
Yeah.
And so there's like that one side where I'm increasingly questioning the way that universities are financially supported, and where like grant funding comes from.
Yeah.
And on the other side, my question is, and this is where I don't think I'm going to earn any fans in making this comment, but in making the university more widely applicable, saying that everybody, you know, I personally, like at a fundamental moral level, I do believe everybody should have the right to higher education, but presenting it as such, like it is essentially something you have to do to go into the university. I think it has changed the mission and the intellectual project of the university, and it has also seriously messed with this funding structure, not just from like how it exploits students, but also how it treats its intellectual staff. And I'm having trouble reconciling those two things insofar as how is a university funded, and how is that funding then used to actually support the intellectual endeavors of scholars. And the reason I hesitate is because I am aware that I myself have greatly benefited from the expansion of access to higher education, you know, being able to go to Yale and go in with a funded PhD is because Yale has a rather significant endowment, and Yale is also invested in in warheads. They're invested in ammunition that, you know, gets sold to state, like the state of Israel. So all of these things, they're just so, like, it is, I think what's helpful is, yes, we're talking about, like, how do we handle this on an individual level? So I think that's one part of the conversation we need to tackle. But also an acknowledgement that there are systems in place that make it very difficult for the individual to exist and to make a living in the pursuit of knowledge. And systematically, that is because it all comes down to profit gains.
100%. And he does talk about this. He kind of breezes over it. He doesn't kind of get into it. But he does talk about the idea of the fact that every intellectual is set within their own historical context, with its own problems, pathologies, triumphs, and peculiarities. And I think you're correct. I don't think there is an answer particularly, but I do think there are actions that we can take to further this idea of being an intellectual in this space, and being an intellectual as on the individual level. One thing I did find, one thing I'm critical of in this, in his essays, there's only one, is I think there is a sense of, I think what he purports here, and rightly so, is a sense of individualism. Is that there's one person to be that voice. There's only, there's one representative. There's the Stephen Dedalus in a portrait of an artist as a young man. There's one person that's always pushing against the societal boundaries. I would, and it's maybe not necessarily a criticism, but I would like to see this expanded where we look at collective action. Yes. And what it means to be an intellectual in a collective space and as a group. Because the thing that I keep butting heads up against is that if I think about the great thinkers, and if I think about the modern age and writers and people, I wouldn't feel comfortable throwing my weight behind any single person, because ultimately everyone is flawed. Everyone exists within the social circumstances in which they find themselves, and whether you're cognizant of or not of that, no one is truly unbiased. And so there is a part of me that would like to expand on this and say, well, how do we actually grow for the benefit by being a collective rather than being an individual?
So the only caveat that I would say is like the specificity of what we mean in collective. So I think having a collective in which your ideas are challenged. He says that you need to seek an audience desiring to be challenged. I also think that you need to seek interlocutors and who are going to challenge you. So I think, in the same way that we think of the group that comes to mind is obviously the Inklings, and having, a space where you are engaging and debating and reading and problematizing your ideas in a collective. I think that absolutely is essential. Doing so, like engaging in one's intellect at an individual level, I think this is harsh, but I think it comes down to ego, in thinking that like my idea, my conception is this like purest form. Like I think that we need interlocutors and challengers in order to to develop and improve and strengthen our thought.
Yes.
The thing I am getting from Cait, the thing I'm observing, is that his presentation of the intellectual as outsider, as exile, as independent, is his concern that in a collective we then mold to the aims of, you know, he's very worried about he's very worried about nation, but I'm also very concerned about group affiliation. And the thing I'm thinking about currently is that I've been like I said, I've been engaging with the Smithsonian talks. And in thinking about the American two-party system, the witnesses that they brought forward immediately kind of get placed in the minds of the viewer as, oh, this is a supporter of the Democratic perspective, this is a supporter of the Republican perspective, this is a, you know, this is a conservative, this is the liberal. And I cannot remember if David Blight has ever openly supported a presidential candidate, for example. But he is associated with this collective of the liberal, progressive Democrat. And I actually don't know. I know him on a personal level because we're at the same institution, but I don't actually know very much about his personal history, and so I cannot say, you know, what he believes his collective to be. But what's interesting to me is how we constantly group intellectuals in a particular like think tank, and I my concern with the idea of establishing a collective is the worry that in doing so you are yourself ascribing that in group or what will become the out group depending on, you know, the way the wind blows. And so I think part of his argument about the importance of actually in embracing the identity of the outsider is also to always put yourself in the position of as what he says, as the beginner of you know, thinking of yourself as somebody who is intentionally, you know, observing and processing. And my concern with creating like formal collectives that you would not have the benefit of that independent perspective. And that's not to say isolated, but
so I really like your clarification there of like of saying, you know, not necessarily isolated, because I think what we tend to do with these spaces is create this this idea of when these collectives or these grouped ideas are formed, it's a sense of creating there is a sense of like having opposition for opposition's sake. And that comes down to this idea of the ego and this idea of you know, I'm right and this person's wrong, which is not what he's purporting at all, and certainly not what I was trying to say about the collective idea. What I was really trying to say there is that there is no one person that can represent. And
nor should
they. And there is this thing that he says about there is no dodging the inescapable reality that such representations by intellectuals will neither make them friends in high places nor win them official honors. It is a lonely condition, yes, but it is always a better one than gregarious tolerance for the way things are.
Yeah.
And I think, and I totally agree with that. I think this idea is that, yes, to be an intellectual means that you are always questioning, you are pushing against those grains, and you will not fit into what we deem preconceived societal groups.
Yeah.
I think where I'm coming from it is to say there is a very fine balance of saying, I will question this, I will be the amateur, I will push against these boundaries, I will exist in this space, but in doing so myself, I am not infallible.
Yeah.
And I think that's the balance that he kind of jump ropes with, but doesn't wholly get to, is this idea that as an intellectual, I am not a representative of a group. I am existing in a set of circumstances, but there is another person sitting beside me who has a different set of intellectual drivers and intellectual curiosity. And there needs to be an acknowledgement, and there needs to be an uplifting as intellectuals, as existing in society, to say, I am the amateur, I don't know, this person will know better.
Quite right. Yeah.
And I always come back to this thing that Rebecca Kwong said when I was listening to an interview with her, and she talks about the fact that when she was a teenager, she subscribed to the notion of a singular hero who could bring about change. And she finds that reflected in her writing, particularly her earlier work. But as she's gotten older, she actually has reevaluated that, and she's shifted away from the self as being the center. As she says, she shifted away from the self as being the center of the change, and looked to linking arms with followers to support those that are already doing the work. Change is based in community.
Yeah.
And so I haven't reconciled this 120%, and maybe it's coming from a place of, I don't know everything, and so therefore I would need to link arms with another supporting person to say this person can be can be independent, can be the outsider who reflects those ideas in a lot better of a way than I can.
Yeah. I think that's right.
Yeah.
I think that's right. And I think that comes back to our conversation earlier about, supporting the work, supporting the scholars, supporting the artists, etc., that resonate. The caveat that I'm hearing from you is it doesn't necessarily have to be something that necessarily resonates or you agree with, but that you respect.
Yeah.
And I think you and I do that in practice, actually. I think what's really a conscious effort on both of our parts, I believe, is recommending other scholars, recommending other intellectuals in this space that we believe are doing the work, are kind of holding by the standards of Said. And though we didn't even know it, I think about some of the people that you and I have mentioned in the past, and what I really love about the work that they do is that they don't take that kind of specialization approach, even though I think there's also, actually, I'm curious, do you think it's possible to have professional specialization, because that is needed in order to be seen as and have any kind of standing in the academic community, Saeed would say that you don't need to engage in the
Yeah.
academic community in order to receive any kind of credibility. I strongly disagree with that in the 21st century. That, you know, I'm not saying you need to be a professor in order to have any kind of public credibility, but I do think that you do need to have some kind of relation to academic professional standard. So can the two things exist at once? Can you be a specialized professional and an amateur public intellectual?
I'll flip the question on its head, if you don't mind, in
Yeah.
saying, so for example, if I was to, actually, very, very prevalent example, when you and I started to work together, I came to you and I said, I've never run a business before. I don't know how to do it. I have my experience, which is in Google. Some of those skills will be helpful, sure, no problem. But I've never run a business. I don't know what I'm doing. This is all new to me. I'm going to be asking a ton of questions. So I think it comes back to, again, that idea of there is a professional specialization that exists when researchers, when intellectuals, when independent scholars, when public historians, when anyone and everyone who engages in their own experiences and learns from those experiences and therefore develops that experience into specialization.
Mm-hmm.
I think by saying, I think the difference comes in saying, this is my experience, this is my specialization, this is what I have experienced.
Mm-hmm.
I came to you saying, I have never run this kind of business. I've never run an online community kind of business. And with all due respect, I would not come to you and say, how do I run a big corporation?
Yeah.
Because, because that is not your experience, nor has that informed the way that you are running your current business and all that kind of thing. So I think specialization happens naturally. Mm-hmm. I think in your pursuit of your purpose, you are going to specialize. That's not to say you're not going to have interests in other areas and all that kind of thing. I think it comes back to that question of acknowledging where your limitations exist.
Fair.
And an acknowledgement of basically saying, my experience has been limited to this side of the work. In doing so, I can offer that perspective. I can offer that contribution. I can offer this exposure, this experience. I cannot, however, offer the experience and the exposure and the knowledge that I have not yet encountered.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about exile. That section really resonated and troubled me. And I was thinking about it, and obviously I've moved out of the United States for many reasons. Partly what I was moving towards. I do genuinely like life in the UK. But I also felt like I was moving away from the United States because of what I saw as a potential very dangerous political environment. And I was thinking about it, and I was writing some things down from this section, and then I was thinking about, honestly, the fact that like you've also left your place of origin, and how does that impact your sense of identity, like not just personal identity, but your sense of identity as an intellectual?
I think it's really interesting because I left South Africa in 2019. I think 2018, 2019. Is that right? No, that's wrong. I don't know. I can't remember exactly when it was, but I left quite early on in my career, in my 20s. My now husband, then fiance, and I moved to New Zealand. We lived in New Zealand for 2 years, and we moved from New Zealand to Ireland. In those moves and leaving South Africa, I think I've had a bit of a different experience, because when I was in South Africa, because of my nationality, because I was Irish, and because my family was part of an isolated community in South Africa, I felt more exiled in South Africa than I've ever felt in Ireland.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of things in that, because there is still a part of me that whenever I hear Miriam Makeba, for instance, my heart and my heart breaks and I weep, because there is a sense of community and connection. I grew up there and spent majority of my life in South Africa and living in the culture, and yet there's never actually been a place where I've truly felt myself feel belonging. Because even when I was in South Africa, I felt isolated, or I felt exiled. When I was in New Zealand, I was an expatriate. Now that I'm in Ireland, even though I'm Irish, I'm not born here. I don't have the accent. I don't have the cultural references that 90% of Irish people would know about if you brought up, because I was not brought up here. I didn't experience the same kind of living. And so there's never actually been a place where I have felt a part. I've always felt the part of the outsider.
How does that impact your work?
I think it's impacted. I think it's been a benefit. Honestly, I think it's been a benefit, because I don't feel a connection per se, or I don't have any strong patriotic feelings in any way. So there is a sense of removal that I feel when I look at, what is going on in South Africa, or when I look at the protests that happened in Ireland, or Jacinda Ardern's presidential term in New Zealand, which faced both huge amounts of praise and huge amounts of criticism.
Yeah.
But it is an unsettling place to be, because I know from, you and I have had this discussion multiple times, and from discussions that I've had with my friends, particularly my friends in the United States, I don't have a patriotic connection to a country in the same way that a lot of people do. A lot of people do have a patriotic connection to their home country, to their homeland, and it's something that I find both beneficial and hindering in that sense, because there's no relatability that I can give. So whenever, questions about the United States, for instance, come up, and there were people on the train yesterday, this group of Americans that were talking about, some changes that were happening to the Constitution. They were far away from me, so I didn't catch all of it. But I kind of just felt myself sitting there feeling unmoved.
Interesting. Yeah.
Which I know is not the case for so many people, because there is a direct impact in what goes on, and I can totally appreciate that. And yet there is almost a blocking off of it for me, because I do not have that relatability.
Even, okay, so Edward Said talks about that we need to essentially focus on the transcendental and universal values of freedom and liberation. And does not, like, if in thinking about that, does that not move you when you think about?
Oh yeah, absolutely. What doesn't move me is I'm I'm gonna receive so much hate for this. I know it. What does not move me is a passionate dedication to a government structure.
I don't think that that's controversial.
It's not controversial when I put it like that, but essentially what I'm saying is, this is another debate entirely, but the idea of nation and nationhood is so wrapped up in these sense of government structures. I think there is a distinct difference between them. And I am very passionate about supporting people and their cultures and the development of those cultures. I just do not think it is tied to arbitrary boundaries and government structures.
Okay.
So, and that actually, I do think that's an experience that I've had from South Africa, because in the country of South Africa, we have 11 official languages, because we have 11 supposedly dedicated tribes or communities of people that collected within a space when those boundaries were drawn. And yet that's not it's not like all 11 sit within that space. Some sit outside of that space, and some straddle the border. Some sit in varied places, some influence the other, and all that kind of thing.
Are we speaking about spaces in terms of like actual geographic boundaries?
Geographical space, yeah. Geographical space, yeah. And it hits against a personal identity, which is why I'm very hesitant to dive down these lines, because I can totally appreciate the importance of protecting that personal identity and holding on to that culture. I'm right there with that person. I do not, however, feel that that is attributed to a flag or a country.
Interesting.
Yeah. Or you get so cancelled after this.
No, you haven't. I mean, you haven't said anything. I don't think that you've said anything that controversial. I think I mean, you've to be honest, like you've been like the way you presented it is actually quite vague. So I think you're fine.
Nailed it.
But
the amateurish stance.
Yeah. I have a difficult time with this because I do feel a sense of like patriotism. And I do feel a sense of love and reverence for my country. And I think that that's partly in being and growing up as somebody fascinated in the early American Republic and the ideals of that. But I've been listening to these debates, and I disagree with the specifics of how people are presenting their arguments and the examples that they use. But the spirit of by which like everybody that is testifying is speaking about the history of America is essentially saying the same thing. And I think I just find it very difficult to divorce myself from that sense of there's nationality and there's nationalism. I don't believe in like the American project insofar as it continues to intervene and engage in foreign affairs.
Yeah.
And I think that like my general principles are relatively universal in that sense. But I also, when we're speaking about the values of representative government, of human freedom, of the pursuit of knowledge, that still feels very in line with the way I imagine the project, or like the kind of like domestic inward facing project of America. I don't think it's holding up those values in any way, shape, or form at the moment. But yeah, it's hard for me, like his presentation of being outsider, I don't disagree with. But at the same time, he still feels a sense of connection, of belonging, of desire to return to his Palestinian roots. And so is the outsider also this conscious desire for belonging? Or is it the rejection of the need for belonging? I don't know.
I don't know. I think I'm very influenced by his book Cultural and Imperialism. Here in that space. One thing I think is really interesting, those values that you talk about, I would consider those universal values. I wouldn't consider those strictly American values.
Well, that's the thing that I'm struggling to grapple with, is that his universal values, I would say, fundamentally align with the mission, not necessarily the execution, but the mission of the new United States.
I find this really interesting because there is... Wait, I'm just collecting my thoughts here. I find this very interesting because I think what is really amazing to see is that dedication and that passion and that pull. And I think that actually comes to something that Cait talks about, which is even though he says like intellectuals should be the ones to question patriotic nationalism, corporate thinking, and the sense of class, racial, or gender privilege, he does come back to this idea that the intellectual should be fueled by core and affection rather than profit, selfish, and narrow specialization.
Yeah.
And I underline and flag this idea of core, because at the core of every person is a sense of what makes up that person. And I don't think we can necessarily divorce our upbringing from our experiences, you know, and this is where it comes back to this idea of that we can never truly be independent. We can never truly be unbiased, because our core is made up of a multitude of different facets.
Okay, so they can coexist.
I think so.
I think the challenge
can coexist.
Yeah, I just feel like the challenge I have and am continuously grappling with is I do feel a sense of like love and duty for my country. And I think it was Frederick Douglass who said to love America is to love her contradictions. And thinking about my role as the intellectual as somebody who both loves my country but also is very much aware of its flaws and very much aware of its dangers and the impact that it's had, I mean, to its own people, but also globally. And the challenge that I have, and this is one of the things that I really appreciated about Cait, is that oftentimes I feel as though I am either intended to decry and hate my country or to be a cold-blooded patriot.
Yeah.
And this is partly why I have spent so much time listening to these Senate hearings and trying to it's not just listening to both sides, because I don't think that's quite indicative of what's happening, but to listen to all of the various ways that people are framing what's going on in America in their own minds. And I do think it does take a bit of a bipartisan bent. But in looking at the work that public intellectuals are doing that I really revere, and the one in particular being David Blight, is seeing how they are applying those kind of universal truths or universal values to the way they are speaking about the use of historical knowledge or the preservation or dissemination. And there's this quote from his opening speech at this hearing where David Blight says, "Historians are not the voice of the state. We are the keepers of memory. And at the best of times, we are storytellers. We are equipped with a host of modern methods, but guided ethically by very old rules that no authoritarian political project ought to be allowed to profane." And I guess the message here that I'm kind of walking away with is, and this is the difficult and uncomfortable thing about intellectual work in general, and what I really appreciated about Cait is you've got to get real comfortable with the gray area. You've got to be real comfortable with like both and truths.
Yes.
Two things, more than two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to sit with that.
Yes.
And to be it. I don't even know if the word comfort is the right term, but I would have to accept.
Yeah, I actually say you have to sit with that discomfort. Sitting with that discomfort creates a friction by which you engage properly.
Yeah, the thing I'm taking trouble with is whether I would say you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because I don't know if you ever get comfortable.
I don't. I think you have to be willing. I think that's I think you have to be willing to be uncomfortable. You have to be willing to sit in that grey. I think Cait takes in these lectures takes, as you say, a very one or the other approach, which is very typical, in my opinion, of like a literary scholar. Literature often takes one or the other and never sits comfortably in the grey.
I would actually say that I think he presents this dichotomous position. You know, for example, he quotes like Antonio Gramsci, the professional intellectual vis-a-vis the capitalist entrepreneur. It's constantly creating these contradictions, but I actually think that in doing so, and the part that I think you and I found frustrating in having had this conversation is that he doesn't give us answers. He's like,
there's no answers.
He's like, everybody's got to sit somewhere in the ether of, you know, in figuring out where they sit in this practice, and I'm not going to give you a guide or a rule book.
No.
And that's the part that you and I found so uncomfortable. And I think that that's, in a way, a great message to kind of to wrap things.
Yeah. The one thing I absolutely love about what he says in that space is he says it's so important to know how to use language well, and knowing when to intervene in language are two essential features of intellectual action. And that's that sense of sitting in that discomfort and knowing when it needs to be, when the language needs to be used, when the language needs to intervene.
Yeah. Wow, what a discussion. This is our longest podcast yet. We are just going to quickly answer a few letterbox questions. We'll be back in a minute to answer some of your queries. Okay, I want to ask you a question, and then I'll have you ask me one.
Cool. Which one do you want me to ask you?
You get to pick. Oh, okay, wait. So one of the questions that, now it's time for the letterbox, and we are starting with a question for Cait. We got a question on YouTube where somebody asked, have you ever written with a quill? Do you prefer a regular pen or a fountain pen? So it's a two-parter.
It's a two-parter. Yes, I have written with a quill that I made when I was a child. It lasted all of 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Before
not terribly sturdy.
It was a failed attempt. So otherwise I've not really written with a quill, but I am a big fan of a fountain pen. I've been practicing my cursive writing lately, and I love a fountain pen. I'm a big fountain pen fan. I don't have a collection, nor do I even plan on developing a pen collection, because I can only imagine how expensive that comes into the fold. But I have an array of Kaweco sport fountain pens that I just adore and love. So that is my question. Okay. My question for you, Kaelyn, do you have anyone that you want me to ask you in particular? No. Okay. The question that I'm going to ask for you is, how does one go about becoming a freelance writer?
Ooh. Okay. So there's a variety of ways to become a freelance writer. I'll talk about the position as a historian, but I'll also talk about just general freelance writing. So I will say that academic press, you know, in terms of journal publications, you do not get paid in the field of history. Luckily, I've heard that especially in psychology that you actually do need to pay to have your publication
Oh,
in a
interesting.
journal. Somebody fact check this for me because I'm very curious. A throwback question to the listeners is let me know in a comment what are the practices of and like economic practices of getting your work published in a journal in your field. You do not get paid to do so. You can, however, become a freelance writer for private journals, for private magazines, publications, etc. I personally have not gotten paid to write. I've been paid to produce visual content, but not written content. But I have a friend, Ashley. She's a client of mine that I work with on her kind of public intellectual profile, and she has many articles that she pitches to Business Insider, to a variety of publications. I also have a friend, Daniel, who's a historian of the early republic, and he publishes with the Bulwark. I don't know what the kind of economic scheme is in terms of his payment, but usually it's writing shorter articles for a variety of publications. You could, for example, like pitch to something like History Hit. The Bulwark would be a good one. Also, I would say that I don't necessarily know that you could get paid to do this, but I've also seen a lot of people collaborating on articles and other types of content on Substack, co-authoring things. So there's a variety of ways to do it. I am not the expert. This is not personally my skill set. I am developing as a writer, but it's not something that I intend to pursue. So I prefer, rather than becoming a freelancer, to have some say over my own writing, which is why I started on Substack.
I think Substack is a great place, and there are spaces where you can, as you say, that you can submit your writing to, like magazines and journal articles. I submitted an article to the Historians magazine like 2 years ago, and that's always been a nice little feather in the CV. It's not paid, but it's a great start to kick off a portfolio.
Yes. All right. Well, I think it's finally time to wrap this very long episode of the podcast with but before we go, just some final reminders that we have our back to school week. You can join on a 7-day free trial to Accepted Society if you so choose. I'll have all the links down below, but that is going to be September 4th and 5th. It's a Friday and a Saturday. And we've put it later in the day, so hopefully it's a little bit easier for those on the West Coast in the States. We also have members all over the world. I'm very, very sorry for those that are in Australia. But we also have Cait's Renaissance course. There are limited seats because we want to make sure that it is a seminar format class. So wanting to make sure that everybody is able to adequately participate. We have limited it to just 12 students. So signups are open now, and you can get access to the syllabus and to the readings once you sign up. So that way you can get started preparing for the course that starts on September 14th. But that is essentially the episode wrapped. Our question of the episode, like I said, is to write down below, what are the publication standards of your field? Do you have to pay to get published? Do you get paid to get published? We'd like to know. Let us know in a comment here on Substack or on YouTube. And we will see you all next week. Bye, everyone.